Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton,
And I'm Bob Scarborough,
and we are
the
the FAIRtax
FAIRtax guy.
guys. Oh, wait a minute. What did I do with my mega? Oh, there it is.
I'm
Went
going to
all the
put
way
this.
behind me. There we go.
You've seen one of those little planes that you stick on the ceiling and it flies around in circles on a string. I'm going to figure out a way to make this a banner plane and fly it in the background of my set here.
Somebody who is a better graphic artist than me, which is just
Okay.
about anybody in the world, would have to do that because I have absolutely zero ability to put that together for you. Now, if you get a real airplane and want to tow a real banner, I could do that for you.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that was my next question. The next time you come to Winston-Salem from Ocala, Florida, I want you to stop by the airfield out there in Ocala and pick up that banner that'll be over there waiting for you. It'll be on the hook and it'll say FAIRtax.
Okay.
Well, you can come up anytime. We had a great time with you and Jade Wally a few weeks ago here in Winston-Salem. It's always good to have Bob up in his hometown because I go to Mr. Barbecue as much as I can by myself.
I brought some home with me. I actually had some for lunch a couple of days ago. So I go to Mr. Barbecue. Yeah. And you go get one of the freshly made, right off the assembly line, hot Krispy Kreme donuts. You've got to do that if you go to Winston-Salem.
That's right. The hot donuts now, and that's a nice icing on the cake, literally, for a great meal at Mr. Barbecue is a Krispy Kreme donut dessert. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'd say we're doing all these free plugs for folks. We don't get anything for this. We just happen to like Mr. Barbecue and Cheerwine and Krispy Kreme donuts and all that kind of stuff.
Right. And I like talking about businesses sometimes because they are fairly. I mean, you got on one side you've got Mr. Barbecue, which is a family-owned business. You got on the other side you've got a multinational, corporation running Krispy Kreme now. It's not run necessarily out of Winston-Salem. There's still some of the plant, the manufacturing plant still here, but you have two different types of businesses that hire people that employ workers at various levels of entry and on up to executive, et cetera. And the challenge is at each of these two businesses, the one thing that they have in common with each other, aside from they're here in Winston-Salem, is that they're having to deal with the tax code on a daily basis and making sure that they don't go overtime on their employees, make sure that they are in compliance as far as when things are filed and advanced estimates that are paid and all, and much deeper than I can even consider. But it's something that we should all think about as what would happen to those two businesses if the Internal Revenue Service were gone and they had all that time back, the department that handled compliance with the Treasury, with the Internal Revenue Service, could actually do something innovative and really spend some time on some substantive benefit to not only their employees, but also to the customers that they serve on a daily basis.
Jane mentioned that a couple of weeks ago when we were there in Winston-Salem, that they would love the economy that the FAIRtax would engender. And even though the people that were in the tax line of service, which is what a lot of people think that's the only thing CPAs do, and they don't,
which is not
those people in that particular line of service would simply transition into more productive work that CPAs do.
And the employees would get an instant raise just like that. And the amount of money you see, and the employer can't pay a higher wage in some cases because they're paying half of the what is it at 7.65%. It goes is the employees part, and the
employee and the employer both pay 7.65% to Social Security.
Right.
And that payroll tax goes away with the FAIRtax. Social Security is funded now by everyone who makes retail purchases above the poverty level, not just people who are working for a paycheck. But
that's a great opportunity to say, after you stoke the fire for Congress.gov, that's a great opportunity for us to say that the folks that are out there with the opportunity to take that money and do something else with it, both the employer and the employee. It's just
we had some crazy stuff last week, and it's going to continue this week with what the Congress critters are trying to do to the tax code. Let me start with HR 9057 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to exclude from gross income certain income from providing homeowners insurance following certain federally declared disasters. Boy, you got to have that in the tax code, don't you?
Boy, yeah. I'm sorry we didn't have it in there before.
right next to this one, HR 9044 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to create a safe harbor for certain perpetual trust funds. Now, I'm not sure what a perpetual trust fund is. Maybe if somebody out there can
set up something a generational kind of thing where you set it up here and dad sets it up, and then the son, daughter, siblings, and then to their issue and on into like great grandchildren and that kind of thing.
I don't know. Somebody who makes their living dealing with those things will have to explain it to me, because I had no clue what it is. But HR 9044 wants to amend the Internal Revenue Code to create a safe harbor for certain perpetual trust funds. I wonder what kind of adverse things that they're seeking safety from. What are they trying to shield themselves from?
Not all perpetual trust funds, certain
perpetual trust funds. Well, that comes from Representative Lloyd Doggett in Texas. It's got a grand total of one co-sponsor, so we'll see where that one goes. Now, this one's almost, I'm toying with this one to put in the Hall of Shame. We got one last week in the Hall of Shame. I may put this one in here next to it. HR 9033, and we've seen something like this before, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to remove short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and certain other weapons from the definition of firearms for the purposes of the National Firearms Act, which we have now learned is included and incorporated into the Internal Revenue Code, and your favorite phrase, for other purposes. Is that a Hall of Shamer or not?
Well, it is, and I think we've had that very similar submission a few months ago. I remember hearing something of the very same.
That looks familiar, but this particular bill, HR 9033, was introduced on September the 29th. So it's just a couple of weeks old. Mm-hmm. But even though there may be something similar, we saw earlier, that one came out. So there are, I guess the two different lobbyists are going after two different folks, and they introduced the same bill.
That's right. Could very well be, and one of them doesn't know the other one's over there doing the same thing.
That could possibly be. Well, I think we'll put that one in the Hall of Shame just for the fun of it. And
we'll find the other one too. We'll dig back and find the other one too, and put them both in there just to remind everybody. Oh, let's just duplicate effort. That'll be a fun thing. Yeah.
Sure. Why not? Well, try this one on for size. This is a Senate bill, S5048, 5048, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to treat Indian tribal governments in the same manner as state governments for certain federal tax purposes and for other purposes. Apparently an Indian tribal government gets different treatment than a regular state government, and S5048 wants to change that.
Well, they do now. I mean, it is now. I mean, we have I think each state gets two casinos. It's each state gets two casinos run by the Indian nations, whether like Cherokee here.
Oh, I have no idea. We got a couple of them here in Florida. I know that.
Yeah, in South Carolina. I mean, and I'm speaking with no knowledge of casinos. I don't go to them. But now we're talking about making them more like state governments and exposing them to more scrutiny by the federal government. Is that what we're talking about?
There's no text in it. It just says to amend the Internal Revenue Code to treat Indian tribal governments in the same manner as state governments for certain federal tax purposes and for other purposes. So I guess if there's an Indian tribal government, that will be dealt with in the same way that the feds would deal with the state of North Carolina or the state of Florida or anywhere else in the country. But the Indian tribal governments will be treated in the same manner as state governments for certain federal tax purposes. Figure that out.
And for anything they can come up with later.
Try this. So see if you can figure this one out. This is another Senate bill, S-5020 from Senator Warnock in Georgia. A bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to temporarily suspend application of the requirement that final assembly of vehicles occur within North America for the purpose of the clean vehicle credit. And again, your favorite phrase, for other purposes. Let's you want to try to decipher that one?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I got it all the way up to the point of where you said, here's the next one that'll no, I'm just kidding. You have an opportunity at every one of these to question why are we pushing all of these initiatives through the tax code? I don't know. I mean, hey, my cars are so old that they were probably, every bit of them was made here in the United States of America, with the exception of maybe. But it comes down to the minute actions that take place in any commercial endeavor, like making a vehicle. How can you get, how do you follow? How do you ensure that actually happens? What kind of person, what department of your business is going to be bringing that into compliance so that you don't trip over something and be out of compliance in a rule like that?
I don't know. Let's see if I can kind of,
or just more regulation that jams up creativity and innovation.
Let me try to parse this out. Apparently there is a clean vehicle credit, and there is a requirement that if you're going to get the this clean vehicle tax credit, that you have to assemble your vehicles in North America. And if I'm reading this right, this bill S-5020 wants to suspend that requirement, so you can still get the tax credit if you build your vehicle outside North America. I may be totally wrong on that, but that's just kind of what it looks like.
They're going to start selling cars as kits, and you're going to have to put them together yourself. You'll have a little diagram there, and they include a wrench and a drill and fabric stretcher and everything else. So you build your own car.
Well, I've always figured out if I get enough money to do this, I want to go up there to Level Cross, North Carolina, and get Petty's garage, associated with Richard Petty. Get Petty's garage there to build me a street legal race car. I mean, take a race car chassis, build a street legal vehicle around it, and put a Nathan P3 train horn on it, and that would just that has nothing to do with the FAIRtax, but that's kind of where this is going. You can build.
Well, that's right, the kit.
Okay, well, build your own. Let's say we'll see what else the Congress critters are up to next week here on FAIRtax Power Radio. But we need to move along here. This is you're doing your Ron Valero impersonation again here and sending me articles we can look at. You sent one from the Daily Caller, which is, I think we mentioned this here a couple of weeks ago when we were there in Winston-Salem, that House Republicans introduced legislation to redirect funds from the IRS to the Border Patrol. Now, the article there at the Daily Caller did not mention the specific bill number, but we have looked it up. It's HR 9023, HR 9023. We didn't find that in our regular search because apparently it doesn't reference the Internal Revenue Code. But it says HR 9023 to rescind certain balances made available to the Internal Revenue Service and redirect them to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. In other words, both sides do it, but they are now continuing to play political games with the tax code. Don't we have a wonderful system?
And that's the thing. And folks, just to remind you that we do all of this not to debate the issues specifically, but to encourage you to dig past all of the superfluous activities that take place around the tax code, because in in all instances, there is a better way. No matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you believe the border is wide open or you don't believe the border is wide open, or you think we need more IRS agents than we have, or they, however much ammo each of the individual departments in the federal government have, and they're all getting, weaponized, if you will. Republican or Democrat, Libertarian, Constitutionalist, Green Party, it doesn't matter. What we're talking about is, and the reason we talk about all of these things is to show you how ludicrous the action is all around the tax code. And think about how having a tax on income is such a game stopper for everything. And if you move that same amount of money, we're not talking about changing who gets what once it gets into the Treasury. What we're talking about is being able to put you in control of when you pay your taxes. And then we can start talking about whether money needs to go one place or the other, or not at all, or back to us, or reduce the deficit, which is way probably larger than it's ever been ever.
Well, I'm going to have to file this one under the same heading as we did the other day with the IRS Reduction Act. That is just political grandstanding. That act has no chance of getting through a Democrat-controlled Congress. Neither does this one. But that doesn't stop the Congress critters from grandstanding stuff and introducing legislation they know that they can't get through. So, even if you think redirecting money from the IRS to the Border Patrol is a good idea, and a lot of people do, and I'm sure there's some that don't, they're still playing these political games, and that's what needs to go away.
That's right. Hat tip to Henry Rogers, who wrote that article back at the end of September on Daily Caller.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's another good one. This came to me. Actually, it was Jade's wife, Kim. This came from her, email account, so it had Kim's name on it. But I would imagine that Jade had something to do with it. He found it. This is a story on Fox Business. Are you ready for this? 5 IRS employees stole COVID relief funds to buy Gucci, trips to Las Vegas, and assorted other goodies too. 5 IRS employees.
And for other items to be named later, to be determined later.
Yeah.
They live in Tennessee and Mississippi and spent the funds on luxury goods and trips, according to the Justice Department. And they, I think some of them are still employed in
it says, the thing says
Tennessee,
5 current or former employees in Tennessee and Mississippi have been charged with scamming the federal government of hundreds of thousands of dollars of COVID-19 relief funds to bankroll extravagant lifestyle. Now that brings the curves. What is the IRS doing distributing these COVID relief funds in the first place? Shouldn't there be another way to do that?
Well, yes, the Treasury's doing that, and the Payroll Protection Program and the EIDL, it's an acronym for Economic Injury Disaster Loan, 2 different components that the Small Business Administration deployed during the pandemic. And so I guess you could apply, but were they the ones that were sort of at the lever of distribution? Those checks went out instantaneously into businesses' bank accounts. The Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL money went directly to a business's bank account.
Yeah, but this article says that the folks who were charged with this submitted false loan applications. So it's not like they were just, skimming it off the top at work. They did the same thing that any other fraudster working for any other organization could have done.
Yeah, they were their own business.
Submit these bogus loan applications seeking more than $1 million. They apparently got it and used the money to purchase luxury cars for travel, and including trips to Las Vegas. And I wonder how much was gambled away. And says, I don't know if we should read these names or not.
I was going to say no. I was just going to say how old they were. 46-year-old man in Memphis. 2 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of money laundering. He left a couple of bills in his back pocket, went into the laundry. He worked for the Internal Revenue Service as a program evaluation and risk analyst in the Human Capital Office and submitted 4 idle applications. He allegedly received $171,000 plus and spent a portion of the money on a Mercedes Benz and deposited additional funds into a personal investment account. That ain't right.
You're right. Not right. Well, the system that allows that needs to be changed, which is why we're here every week on FAIRtax Power Radio. Another lady, 38 years old in Cordova, Tennessee, charged with 3 counts of wire fraud, claiming she wasn't working while employed by the IRS.
Of course, sure how to read that. The problem. They're not working while they're employed. That's the problem. She
claimed she wasn't working while she was employed by the IRS. Oh, that's a whole new can of worms. Says she used over $11,000 worth of these loan funds for manicures and massages and to purchase luxury clothes.
Do you know how stressful it is to work at the Internal Revenue Service? So those manicures and massages, that you got to have that. That's a necessity. Yeah.
Yeah. And you got another lady, 35 years old, Olive Branch, Mississippi, 1 count of wire fraud, spent almost $29,000 on Gucci clothes and another trip to Las Vegas, probably with the other 2.
And a fella in Memphis, I wonder if I guess most of them are in a couple people in here's 2 more guys in a guy and a gal in Memphis. One fella, 27, pled guilty to 1 count of wire fraud, and a young lady, 56 years old, she's charged with
they're an item, the 2 of them together.
Yeah, 123,600 plus in loan funds on jewelry and trips to Las Vegas. Maybe if they were all on the same plane, first class. Well,
they all face up to 20 years in prison for each count and 10 years for money laundering. So I wonder if they'll do the same thing to them that the IRS did to Alexandria Bittner. They'd face 20 years for this count and 20 years for this one and add it all up. So you end up with,
they could save time at the Supreme Court and just pile all that in. And then we could walk out there with we could be at the Supreme Court that day and go FAIRtax. And a lot of the problems would be solved. I mean, fraud is a big part. I mean, to consider how large our government is, our federal government is, you have to know that there's a lot of BS going on. And I don't mean Bob Scarborough. There's a lot of
BS. That's your initials, right?
Yeah, it just happens to be done. There's a lot of opportunity for people to take advantage of the fact that the government is so large, and to be able to put your foot in the stream and break the flow of revenue from income and move it over to another method, the FAIRtax, for a tax on consumption, because that's what the FAIRtax is. Like, the reason I say tax on consumption sometimes when I say the FAIRtax is because I want people to realize that when you talk about the FAIRtax, you're not talking about a flat tax. There's only one way to do it. Move my finger into the picture. Yes. There's only one way to do it, and that is change the code. Get rid of the Internal Revenue Service. No more income tax. Tax on consumption, the FAIRtax, not flat tax, because, sorry, Steve Forbes, it is still an income tax, and you still have to have the Internal Revenue Service, or you may not, but you still have the Internal Revenue Service in that scenario.
You don't know what's going to happen to these people. Being charged with something doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to stick. And a lot of times these cases get pleaded down, so the courts don't get messed up with it at all. So we're just kind of going through it and seeing that that the IRS employees, current and former IRS employees, were stealing COVID-19 relief funds, which were being distributed through the IRS, which was a rotten idea to begin with.
And we're not old enough, as we said in our last episode, to remember a time where there wasn't an income tax. So we kind of say, well, I guess this is the way it is, and so we're going to have to live with it. And no, we don't have to live with it. We have to talk about it amongst our friends. We have to get engaged at the local level. We have to take the next couple of weeks and really get in touch with our candidates that are running for U.S. House and for Senate, and make sure that they are aware of. You might not be able to get them to say, "Yeah, I'm gonna," but you absolutely want them to know that you are going to vote for them based on some things that they might consider, and then follow up after the first of the year. And maybe you have a new congressman at the first of the year that would be receptive to a conversation with you about a tax on consumption, the fair tax, and make that happen. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take all of us to do that. And we are just so thankful for all of our viewers and listeners that are out there. This is the year to get engaged with the, not to get married, but this is the year to get engaged with the fair tax on a level that gets you in a position where you can let other people know, your friends, pass the word along, share the videos and the audio, and remember to, at the water cooler, now that everybody's getting back to in-person working, let's talk about the fair tax and how much you can save, money that you can save by getting an instant raise with the federal income tax gone completely, and no more income tax federal side taken out of your paycheck. I think we're there. So thanks to all of our people that are watching and listening. We appreciate you and really look forward to getting engaged with you here in the future about how we can all work together to make this happen.
Yeah, well, let me encourage folks to go to fairtax.org and open up the FAQ there and just read it top to bottom. That's the best, mini education you can get on what the fair tax is, how it works, what it'll do for you. And I say, we spent a couple of episodes here on Fair Tax Powder Radio a good while back just going through it, and we didn't begin to get through all of it. But there is a lot of good information in the FAQ at fairtax.org. There's also some good information under the research tab at fairtax.org. So again, we would encourage people to do that. Encourage people, if they do have questions or comments about the fair tax or anything related thereto that we can answer, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Look at that. We got our email address 2 programs in a row here. Thefairtaxguys@gmail.com, or leave us a note on our YouTube channel, or leave us a note on our Facebook page. We do read everything. We do respond to the ones that, we think we can make a good show out of. And
right. And if you have a question, I had, and you remember, we talked to Elizabeth at here in Winston. We're up here. And she made a comment. She said, we don't all make the same dish. We all come to the table, and I have my dish food I'm going to bring, and you have the food you're going to bring, and we're going to sit around and talk. And I think that's where we need to be. The fair tax isn't a partisan initiative. It's bipartisan. It's apolitical. It has to do with collection of revenue for the Treasury, as opposed to an income tax, a tax on consumption. The fair tax does that. And Elizabeth made a good point. We can all sit around and try each other's dishes, and then, come together and figure out what's going to work best for all of us. And I really like that.
The fair tax will be the Mr. Barbecue of the entire table. Everybody will like that best. But that's right. That's just going to have to wrap up this edition of Fair Tax Power Radio. We're slap out of time again. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
Fair Tax Guys reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So what would you do for her?
Well, we've got several programs that will help her. We just need to find out how much she makes. But the good news is, the less she does, the more we can help.
Yeah.
If I may, with the fair tax, we wouldn't even tax her income. So the more she makes, the more she has.
But still, a consumption tax could eat up a lot of her income.
Which is why at the beginning of every month, we're actually going to give back all that she pays in taxes on basic necessities.
You're going to give her back her taxes?
Every month, on everything taxed on basic necessities. But we're also going to give it back to you and to every American citizen.
Why?
Well, we believe taxes should